Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard. So I'm not sure this is the best time to give a session, especially after lunch, but we try to suit ourselves. So as you heard, my name is Ahmed Elragal. I work as a professor of information systems at Lund University in northern Sweden. So probably we need to make a kind of introductory context to this session because most of the sessions that we have seen so far in the morning are talking about how do we conduct data science. How do we do it? Analytics and anomalies, and I have seen and attended quite a few sessions. So, but this session is not about how do we conduct data science, but it's about one of the stakeholders, principal stakeholders of data science, which is the decision-making process. So, if you look at the objective, and we had some sessions also talking about the benefits and the drivers for data science. And one of the main benefits or drivers for organizations to invest and to conduct data science is to support the decision-making quality and the decision-making process. And hence, this session is about the decision-making. So, and the reason I hope is now clear that this is how data science is supposed to influence the decision-making process and quality in businesses. So I take an evolutionary perspective in this presentation. So I talk about how it was, what is going on currently, and then how it looks like in the future. And then in that sense, I mean, we always say and believe that studying history helps us to justify things, to accept the current and the present, and also to forecast the future. So this is where I'm coming from. So in the presentation, we will look at some of the evolution perspective. So we look at what happened and when it happened, and the biggest milestones as far as supporting the decision-making process is concerned. So this is what is waiting you in this session. So we start with this quote. Probably many of you know well Peter Drucker, one of the management gurus. So he once said, whenever you see a successful business, someone once made a courageous decision. And here I'm trying to establish again this context of this session, that the importance of the decision-making process. And to many people, to many management scholars and also business intelligence researchers and practitioners, the most important skill a manager should have is the decision-making skill. So here we use this quote to emphasize the importance of the decision-making skill that managers should have. So if you wanted to set a definition, so to set the stage for this talk, so the process of choosing, so if you wanted to highlight what is decision-making, so it's to choose among alternatives, course of actions, and choose the option that would achieve a certain goal. So we're not making the decision in a vacuum, but we wanted to serve a certain goal and to attain a certain utility. So we're aiming at a certain utility or benefit from making the decision. If we take that face validity of this definition, I mean, it's very straightforward. So why the hassle then? So if the manager is making nothing more than to choose alternatives, and then this is to serve a certain goal, the goal hopefully is known upfront. So why is the decision-making process so complicated? And then we try to serve this process using different technologies, amongst which is the data science. So we try to get some sort of highlights to answer this question. So as I said, it's very straightforward. So as a manager or a decision maker, because many people are making decisions, not only managers. We are making decisions. I mean, every one of us is making almost, according to some research, 100 decisions every day. So this is to start from what we dress, what we eat, when do we go, where, how, which route to take, what to talk, etc. So we all make decisions on daily basis, regardless we are managers or not. So some of the dimensions of difficulty in the decision-making process are here in front of us. The uncertainty. So we're not dealing with information that is always certain, or situation even that is always certain. So uncertainty plays a major role towards making the decision-making process a bit complicated to the decision maker. The conflict. So here conflict might arise from different corners. So it might come from within the organization or between organization and its stakeholders, manager and the other also stakeholders, internally, externally as well. Scarcity of resources. So the decision in many cases, especially if this is not operational, so tactical or strategic, has a trajectory to influence resources of the organization. So these resources are not abundant, so we wanted to make sure that we make the right decision, so as to safeguard these resources. Lack of structure. So on many occasions, decisions, of course, you're a very lucky person if all the decisions that you're required to make are structured. So they are well known, they are short term, there are existing solutions, and so forth. But unfortunately, this is not the case. In terms of frequency, most of the decisions that we make are either semi or unstructured. And therefore, this is one also of the dimensions of difficulties. And then uncontrollability. So quite often when managers make a decision, so the decision is to encounter and confront variables that we don't have control over, which is like, for example, that we decide to introduce a new product in a certain market or something, and then you don't have control. So there are like beliefs, there are studies, statistics, modeling, etc., that the product will be accepted on that market with these features, but that might not be the case because we don't control how customers behave. So in that case, uncontrollability is also part of the difficulty, the dimensions of difficulty. So this is, of course, not an inclusive list, but this is to give us an idea why and how the decision-making process is really not straightforward and it is really difficult. And the skill, when people have good quality skill on making decisions, I mean, this is what makes it or break it for organizations. Do we have different types of decisions? So certainly, yes, there are different types of decisions like I introduced. And do we know something like the decision-making process? Is there a process that decision makers should follow while making decisions? So we try to answer these two questions. Oops. Yeah. So the taxonomy or the types of decisions, broadly speaking, this has been heavily researched and kind of established, I would say, in the literature and previous studies that we are faced with three types of decisions. So the structured one, so that one is as from the name, this is very kind of programmed decision. So it is known, variable behavior is also studied. There are existing solutions, more than one. It has like a short-term impact on the organization, and we make quite a large number of those organizations on daily basis. A typical example here is like reorder point. How much to order from that product. So if you are a stock keeper, so you count or you have an indicator electronically, how many products we have, the number of products we have from that product category or so, when it reaches this limit, and then we reorder. So this is a kind of a structured process here. On the other hand, the other extreme, we have the unstructured decision. So this is a typical also case here is the R&D. So the research and development problem. So you try to solve a problem that was not solved before. There are plenty of variables that we do not control. We don't know the behavior of those variables. So that is the impact of those decisions is like prolonged. It has a long-term impact on the organization welfare as well. And in between the two, there are semi-structured decisions. So where some of the variables affecting the decision are well known and some others are not known. As we could here feel, it's not about knowing the three types and that's it. But here, the manager really needs more help, more assistance, more support from the technology when the decision is getting much more difficult, especially when we talk about semi and the unstructured problem. But even structured ones, so we still need technology, we still need support. And the reason here is like because there are too many variables and too many solutions. So the support is also needed, but for a different purpose. So this is in a nutshell the three types of decisions that we make. And then the next point is about, is there a known decision-making process? This is very important for any data scientist to know, because like I said, the ultimate goal of your work as a data scientist is to support in an organizational context the decision-making quality. If the business is able to make quality decisions, then they are in a better off. And hence, we reap benefits of investing in technologies such as data science. So this model is like quite old and quite established, by Herbert Simon. So he got Nobel Prize sometime, I think it was in late 70s. He was an economist, but also studied decision-making process, and was the first to coin that model. And then when Simon was introducing this decision-making process model, so identified that time only 3 stages of the model, which is intelligence. So the name here means collecting data. So intelligence here has nothing to do with AI, but it's about data collection. And then the second phase of the decision-making process is to design alternatives. So here we look at the alternatives. What alternatives do we have? And then we need to evaluate those alternatives. So it's like we have multiple models and then evaluate the models. And then the last one is the choice. But then you see here that I put the 4th stage in a different color, and the reason is the following. Do you see, let me also see this by voting by hand here. Do you see difference between decision making and problem solving? Yes? Those who do not see difference? Yeah, many people are still under the effect of the lunch probably, so not many people voting. But actually there is a difference, of course. So decision making is not synonymous to problem solving. So because here, if you look at the 3 phases, which is again the phases of the decision-making process, we end up by making a decision. But that does not solve the problem. What solves the problem is the last phase, actually, which is the implementation. And this is where also some uncontrollable variables might be encountered here. And the essence here of that point is like also adding to the difficulty of the decision-making process is like sometimes we have the best model, and then we have done sophisticated analysis catering for all variables in the world. And then we have made a quality decision. This is the choice. But then when it comes to implementing this is a completely different story. So the problem is not solved by making quality decision only. So it's not sufficient, but it is solved when you implement that decision. And therefore here, the 4th phase was later on added to the model to indicate that, again, this is the phase where the problem is solved. Each one of those phases, I will not go on to, of course, one by one, but I'm giving you some sort of ideas on some of the challenges that decision makers face on each one of those phases. So in the intelligence phase, so we face a lot of data problems, some of which also are common with big data. So as you will see, so incorrectness of the data. So here the terms are clear. Incompleteness, not on time, not verifiable, so this is like veracity in big data. One of the V's also recently added. Incompatibility between the data, this also problem is later on solved using like data warehouse. We will come to see this in a minute. And also data overload here. So these are all problems that we encounter even on the 1st phase of the decision-making process, which also add to the complexity of that process, as I said in the beginning of this talk. So here we, after this introduction, we look at some of the, like, if you wish, milestones of the decision-making evolution. How it was, what is going on currently, and then how it looks like in the future. Probably the last part will be much more appealing to many people here. So what we think will happen in this key process in the future. So here I put some sort of names. Of course, this is not comprehensive, but these names are very important to the decision-making literature and practices, if you wish. So HENRI, FAYOL, HENRI, MINTZBERG, HERBERT, Simon, DSS, GDSS, EDW, big data. So this is what I see are like the milestones on the evolution of big data. So we get some sort of highlights on each one of them. So this is one of the gurus of management, a very well-known scholar. So HENRI FAYOL. I'm not sure how many of us heard that name before. Oops. Yeah. Okay. So what did he say? So he studied different businesses, and he had a belief like all organizations that early time in history. So he had a belief like all organizations are similar in the way management practices are. So regardless you work for government, for private, small or large, it doesn't matter. So he had that belief that management is a function indifferently between the different organizations. And according to him, so those functions are 6, and these are the technical function, the commercial function, financial, security, accounting, and what is called managerial. And the managerial, if you look at it, so this definition has sustained ages, by the way. So planning, organization, commanding, coordination, and control. So this is for him that time, that is management. And then came, as I said, so this study and these definitions sustained for quite substantial time. And then came another researcher, HENRI MINTZBERG, who has conducted a very well-known study. So MINTZBERG was not very happy with this. So, and the reason for this, and the reason I brought this onto the presentation, is because of the decision making. So HENRI FAYOL did not put decision making as part of those functions. And then MINTZBERG went on to a very nice study. So he said, I will go to managers in different businesses and ask them, what do you guys do? And then decode the answers onto what is called roles. He came up with a very well-known study. If you Googled it, you find zillion pages talking about this. So it's called MINTZBERG study, 10 roles of managers. So according to this study, so managers are doing 3 major roles. So the interpersonal roles, informational, and decisional. And you can see here, we started to see decision making, the decisional role, as an independent task of management. You cannot be a manager if you are not able to make decisions, quality decisions as well. And in his study, he identified those 4 types of decision points. So entrepreneurship decisions, disturbance handling decisions, resource allocation, and finally negotiation with internal and actually external, like vendors, etc. So this was like a paradigm shift on the way management is known. So starting from that study forward, decision making has taken a different shape, and it has become like an essential skill for management/managers. So what Herbert Simon then later on said is like management is as simple as decision making. So this is a very short definition to management. Then if you wanted to define management, I remember this definition very well. So it's nothing more than making decisions. So the intelligence design choice model, which we talked about a few minutes ago, is quite often referred to as the process of making decisions. But amongst those things as well, Simon as well introduced very key terms as well to the decision-making domain, which is the bounded rationality, that we all have bounded rationality. And then we have also the satisfying decision. Satisfying means that even if we aim at an optimum decision, so because of this bounded rationality, we will never be able to make the optimum decision, but we make satisfying. So this is like good enough decision. So because of this constraint, cognitive constraint. So this was a wave, like I said. So now we look from HENRI FAYOL, understanding, and then the MINTZBERG study, the Simon decision making phases, and now in the 70s, early 70s, came the first pop-up of that term, decision support system, by Gorey and Scott Morton. So they have defined this system as a system used to support the decision-making process. As I said, if you look at what kind of decisions would that DSS, by the way, that DSS term also sustained quite long period of time until early 90s, where people started to replace that term with, do you know which term took over the DSS? Anybody knows? It's business intelligence. So business intelligence almost took over that term, early 90s, and of course, until nowadays. So the idea here is like this is a kind of a system that is used to support managers while making decisions. And across the board of decisions, so it's not only one decision. So the 3 main types of decisions, again, the structured, semi-structured, and unstructured. So this was also a wave. And then came another wave in the decision-making literature, which is the GDSS, or group decision-making systems. So this is a situation whereby the decision is being made by more than one person. So group of managers, they collectively make a decision. So this is like a board decision making or something. Of course, this is good that we are able to maintain sync between group members, but also it has its own challenges. So that we have the attitude of managers, maybe we have people like dominating the decision making process, informal power. So, but also it solves some problems like we don't need to meet in one location, so we have this technology that enables us remotely to contact each other and then make the decision. But this was also a kind of a paradigm shift, if you wish, on the way decisions are made. Also, one of the problems that was encountered while doing the intelligence phase, remember the 3 phases of the decision-making process was like the data incompatibility. Also starting from 90s, this technology started to take shape and being used extensively, which is the data warehouse. So where organizations have managed to move from that bucket theory, they call it sometimes, onto the reservoir. So instead of having a lot of data in isolation and then making decisions based on this data is really difficult. So they moved on to that kind of reservoir analogy, that now the data is put onto one central repository. So this is the data warehouse. So in a sense, the data warehouse has enabled the businesses to make better decisions. And the reason is like now decisions are like faster. So this data incompatibility problem has been solved by the data warehouse. That also was like a landmark in the evolution of the decision-making process. And recently, like starting from, we don't have really sharp date here, but like almost 10 years ago, 2010, 2009, something like this. So we started also to see widespread usage to the technology and the term big data. And nowadays, so the decision-making process is faced with this technology that we wanted to make best use of. So it's now like we have those 3 ingredients, as you can see. So we have the business problem, like some of the speakers talked about today. And then we have big data, and then we have the decision-making process. So the idea here is like to make best utilization of big data and data science in different business domains and contexts to support the decision-making process. So this will give us the title of this presentation, which is like evidence-driven decision-making. So we'll come to that term in a minute. So here we are moving from a kind of almost a simple decision-making process, the Simon model, which is sustained edges, like I said, so intelligence, design, and choice, onto a situation where each one of those phases is now supported with plenty of technologies. So we get data from different sources. Now we get data from structured, semi-structured, unstructured. All the big data domain and world now does not live in isolation, but we wanted to bring all this big data and analytics and AI to support these 3 phases of the decision-making process. So this is easier said than done, as I said. Even if you have the most sophisticated technology, I mean bringing that technology to the decision-making process, testing and verifying the impact of that analytics on the quality of the decision is not that easy. So instead of having mere technologies supporting the decision-making process like DSS, now we have much more technology. The technology platform, the technology landscape, if you wish, is getting very sophisticated. And now it is really very difficult to look at how and when. So it's not only which decisions that might be easy, like churn predictions, for example. Many people talk about this. So that you might think that the decision point is clear here. But now come to the decision making. Now the decision maker, now you have the output of data science, and then what you wanted to do is like, what kind of percent, if that is at all viable, do I take from data science versus manager? Because we'll also come to speak about one future trend here. So do we have like an optional situation where like as a manager or a decision maker, you wanted to get the output of this churn prediction and then totally rely on it and make a decision? And if that is the case, why do we need managers then, if that is the case? And if that is not the case, what percent should I get? What kind of evidence should I get? And how does it look like? How do we balance what we get from data science versus manager's vision and the intuition and the experience, etc. So like I said, this balancing the formula between those two ingredients is not that easy. So this is one of the very nice studies. I'm not sure if you heard about it or not, but probably I need to ask you. So there is a study that was conducted about the world's most influential decisions that have ever been made in history of mankind. So the study identified 75 decisions as like the best decisions ever, and also 75 like worst decisions ever. Let's avoid the worst, but I will give you some sort of highlights onto this. Has anybody heard about this study before? Also, this is quite known to people studying decision making. That was, I think, in the top 10 decision of Queen Isabella of Spain that decided to sponsor Columbus voyage 1492, which led to the discovery of the Americas, of course. And the study also looks at different decisions, and this is like one of the very pioneer studies. And imagine if she did not, if she has decided differently, how the world would look like then. Benjamin Franklin, that time US ambassador to France, encouraged the immigration of skilled workers to US, of course, which has influenced the manufacturing capabilities that time. So this decision, I'm not sure you guys know about it or not, but this decision has been listed as one of the best, and of course attributable to Microsoft, and one of the worst. Not sure we have IBMers here or not, but one of the worst decisions ever made in history by IBM. So Bill Gates decided to license Microsoft DOS that time to IBM, and this was like the tipping point, where afterwards Microsoft started to dominate that desktop market. And of course the opposite has happened to IBM. Michael Dell as well decided to sell directly. That time also that was unique, and then many people started to follow afterwards. So build to order strategy. Ian Carlson, CEO of SAS, also decided to change that bad image of the company at that time about punctuality. So decided to do this via managers. And the result was like also changing from like one of the worst onto one of the best also that time. Not sure about nowadays. I might not agree with this. So Frank McNamara also, this was the guy behind the plastic cards. So it was, I was always questioning before I read this study, why do they call it Diners Club? Did anybody know here before that? So this is the reason why. The founder, so he was once at a restaurant and then found that he does not have money. So he came up with the idea, why don't we have cards? So diners can use. And this is where the name came from. And of course, the buying and selling now has changed afterwards. So we'll probably stop at this point on those decisions so that have been ranked as most influential decisions. But now we focus much more on what is going on and what might look in the future. So formally evidence-driven decision-making, everybody here heard the term quite often here. It's also called sometimes fact-driven or data-driven. So fact, data, evidence, these are synonymous. Refer to the practice of basing decisions on analysis of data instead of being based on pure intuition. So that is in a nutshell the process. So what is going on nowadays? So much more organizations and businesses are relying on data before making a decision. And then even there is some sort of, I wouldn't say legislation, but directives. There is an EU directive, by the way, in education. And then here the directives are talking about what? Talking about certain decisions, especially strategic decisions, they need evidence. So they cannot be taken without evidence. So this is a kind of also a paradigm shift on the way decisions are made. So as a manager or an official, So it's not at our discretion now to say, okay, I will rely on tuition or not. In some occasions nowadays, no, it's not that discretionary anymore. So the waves are even extending. So now we have also the term AI-based decision making. So if you look at what happened on the evolution that I presented here, so it started like in the 80s, late 80s, decision support systems, data warehousing in the 90s, real-time data warehousing 2000s, and big data analytics, and nowadays it is evidence-driven decision making, or even AI. I wouldn't go much onto those details, but there is research actually conducted on businesses that rely on evidence, on output of data science, and then organizations that are somehow similar or competing, and then research realized that those that make decisions based on evidence from data, they have better performance. So this is like 4 to 6% increase in productivity, and also other increase compared to apple comparison here to return on asset, on equity, and market value as well. So those who are able to make it, yes, there is evidence that making decisions based on data evidence does help businesses to perform better compared to competitors. Another statistic also revealed that in a certain research, 24% of businesses are now making either currently decisions based on evidence from data or plans. So this also, the half full of the glass here is not the 24, by the way, it's the 76 for everybody in the room. So there is room for improvement, I mean. So there are plenty of organizations that will also join that trend, if you wish. Use cases here, so you also find some businesses, some efforts at global efforts here. So PricewaterhouseCoopers here collected this data about 320 million of US consumers to study the behavior of making financial decisions. General Electric as well. So if you look at this statistic even 3 years earlier, so this company had like 2/3 of 250 billion backlog in orders from services based on mathematical intellectual property. So what is yet to come? So if we now try to realize what is going on, so this is what is going on is like evidence-driven decision making. More and more organizations, more and more managers, more and more types of decisions are being made based on evidence from the data. But now we are still in a situation where we have the discretion to choose. This is a very simple example that if you used like Google Maps or otherwise technologies, and then you wanted to make a decision, here transportation decision or driving decision, you still have the discretion to choose route A, B, C. What is going on nowadays is like more and more of those examples now are coming up, but without the choice. So the technology will make some sort of like compulsory decisions. And sometimes even we are unaware that this decision has been made by some sort of an embedded system. So we might lose the option as humans in many of those occasions. And also the algorithm CEO. If you Google that term, you will find some sort of fancy stories here. Like it's not only that we try to automate routine tasks, but even like intellectual tasks, like being the manager. So you probably one day will go and your boss is a bot, or the whole CEO of the company is a bot, probably IBM Watson or something. That is in the making, by the way. What takeaways do we have here out of this talk? So a very essential definition to management that was provided earlier on by Simon is like management is decision making. So decision making is the most important skill for managers. And it is getting more and more sophisticated as we have seen. So evidence-driven, this is nothing easy. So not every manager, I mean, find it really easy to swallow the output of data science onto the decision-making process, no matter how sophisticated and then how robust it is. So this is nothing easy now. Fact rather than feeling, so become the basis for making decisions. And decision making is becoming more and more mathematical and statistical. Also, we have here, of course, the skill shortage, as you know, also from data science perspective. More and more organizations also are moving towards making decisions based on evidence from the data. I presented this one study which says it's 24%, but also, like I said, it's like 3/4 are still in the pipeline. With that being said, these are some references for those who wanted to read more about it. I come to the end of this presentation, and thank you for listening.